And welcome to another live episode of Mango Podcast Live Radio. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Remember that I'm here every Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. New York time, 6:30 p.m. Dominican Republic time, and 11:30 p.m. Sweden and Spain. And also to remind you that I always upload every Mango Podcast Live Radio episode on YouTube and my different podcast platforms. Thank you so much for listening. So today's episode is going to be a little different from what I usually do. You know that I play music and then I talk about something and I share different events that are going on and very interesting activities. As you guys know, this week was the International Day of Women's Rights, or Working Women. I mean working women in the sense that the origin of the date is because of working class women protesting against unfair conditions in factories and so on. So I already posted something about my feelings about this date on my Instagram account. So I want to use today's opportunity to talk about a very important and special case and situation that is going on around the world, especially in some countries in Latin America. We celebrated when Argentina got their abortion rights, but unfortunately, abortions are completely banned in Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic, which means that it doesn't matter if the woman's life is at risk. It doesn't matter if the pregnancy is the result of a rape or incest, and it doesn't matter if there is a fetal malformation which makes the survival of the fetus impossible. Abortion is completely illegal. So I want to talk about Manuela in El Salvador. El Salvador is, together with Nicaragua and Honduras, have very, very aggressive anti-abortion laws. So Manuela, right, her case, it's a very, very sad and important case, and I want to start by, trigger warning. I don't want you guys to feel uncomfortable. So I just want to start by saying that disclaimer. Okay, so Manuela was a low-income woman who lived in a rural area in El Salvador, and she didn't even know how to read and write. She lived in a very, very rural area, and she was poor. Okay, so she had like a very, very strong abdominal pain, and she decided to go to the toilet. Well, not to the toilet, because in the rural area where she lived there was no toilets, but she decided to go to the latrine. And when she went to the latrine, she passed out, and she didn't know that what she just had was an emergency, an obstetrician emergency. Okay, pregnancies are very fragile and vulnerable. Like, even if even if it's wanted, a miscarriage could happen at any point during a pregnancy, and it has nothing to do with what the mother did in some points in the pregnancy, especially if the pregnancy is before week 18th and week 12. Okay, then she goes to the hospital, and in the hospital she didn't get the attentions she deserved. She didn't get proper health care. And then the hospital personnel called the police and accused her of trying to perform an abortion on herself. Keep in mind that abortion is completely illegal in El Salvador. So she was pretty much handcuffed to her bed, to the hospital bed, without getting proper care and accused of a crime that, first of all, it shouldn't be a crime in the first place, and second of all, she didn't do it. Okay, that's another thing. It's very, very common for people to find out they're pregnant months later. Okay, and so keep in mind, Manuela, she was a woman who came from a very underprivileged background. She didn't even know how to read and write. She came from a very rural area in El Salvador. So she was sent to be judge, right? And in her trial, there was a lot of irregularities, right? For example, there was a lot of like sexist remarks and gender stereotypes, and also there were a lot of like irregularities. And she was then, after this very horrible trial, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison. 30 years in prison. And she was charged, and her supposed crime that she was getting 30 years for was aggravated homicide. Okay, but then she went to prison, unfortunately, and then while in prison, she had lymphatic cancer, and she died in 2010. She didn't receive any type of medical treatment for her cancer, and she died in 2010. There's been a lot of fighting for this case, and today there was a hashtag in Spanish, Justice for Manuela, as a form of online protest. And she had 2 children by the time she was trial and sentence. They were 9 and 10. She was the only support of those children because the father of those children abandoned her. She didn't have access to education because of social inequality. Her 2 first, the first 2 times when she gave birth to her 2 children, she gave birth at home. And all of this injustice and all of this accumulated injustice, and there was an investigation, of course, and something that happened was that she had some like stomach aches and tiredness, and then she went to a healthcare center, and they diagnosed her with gastritis, right? But they didn't check that, you know, if she was pregnant or anything like that. And another thing that they discover, like in the investigation, is that, you know, she had preeclampsia symptoms. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, a pregnancy is something very fragile. You could have a miscarriage at any point during a pregnancy, and there's a point in the pregnancy that it doesn't matter what you do, you could have a miscarriage, especially all of the way up to week 12. There's nothing, it doesn't matter what you do, you could have a miscarriage. And she didn't have the economic means to hire a lawyer. She had like public defenders who she hardly spoke with, and they, according to her family, they didn't listen to her version of what happened. They didn't listen to her. So, and there's been like fighting. There's all of this feminist group have been going all the way to human rights commissions to fight for this case. And it's been almost 10 years. And there are like cases, countless cases like this in countries where abortion is not completely legal, especially in countries where abortion is completely banned, like Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic. Rich women get abortions, poor women die. Because, of course, I'm not going to give you guys much details because I want to respect the identity of the people who have told me. But the only thing I'm going to say is that if you have the money, you can get an abortion in my country. So the situation in my country, in the Dominican Republic, is also that it's completely banned. Right now, we're fighting for at least having exceptions to the abortion law. That's the first step that we're fighting now. There's the case of Esperancita. It was a very, very famous case back in 2012. Esperancita was 16 years old and she had leukemia, and she was refused treatment because they found out she was 9 weeks pregnant, and they refused to give her treatment because the chemotherapy could have killed the fetus. At the end of the day, both Esperancita and the fetus died. And there's so many cases like that. And then you start thinking about all of these horrible abortion laws. And again, I am, and this platform is pro-choice, 100% pro-choice. But at the same time, we believe in reproductive justice. And in a future episode, I'm going to talk more about reproductive justice and sterilizations. But all of these anti-abortion laws, what's the purpose of them? Is it to protect who? Because it's not to protect the fetus. It's only to control women. It's only to control women. And I think that I want to use and invite people during this week of the commemoration of the 8th of March to think about countries like mine who have these horrible anti-abortion laws. And I want to use this opportunity to invite you to support these activist groups as much as you can. I'm always sharing information on my Instagram Instagram stories. They sound like histories because, you're telling a history in your Instagram. Okay, in my Instagram stories, I'm always sharing information and resources of groups that are working on these issues. So I invite you to please check them out. Thank you so much for listening. Oof, I'm sorry, today's topic was a little rough to discuss and I didn't have a music pause, but I just wanted to use the time wisely and to talk about this case that is very, very important to talk about. I will upload this episode on my different podcast platforms and of course on YouTube, and every time I upload my episodes I always include links with sources and also with resources and places where you can get more information about the subject. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe, to comment and share. I'm here every Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. New York time, 6:30 p.m. Dominican Republic time, and 11:30 Sweden and Spain. All of the links are available on my Instagram bio, and also all of my links are available on mangopodcast.com, which is my official website. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I see you next week. Remember, next Wednesday. Bye.